When I read about the Italian perspective, I was immediately attracted by the idea, actual perspective or the perspective of Italians at the time. It's something that has been not always analyzed very well because we know a lot about the cooperation between the Italian partisan organizations or the anti-fascist movements and the British SOE or the missions of the American OSS. But there was for sure a mutual sense felt by the Italians, not by all Italians, but by the most part of them. Is based on the fact that there are many emblematic cases which represent an evidence of how today we can consider the real feeling of many Italians during the operations for the liberation of Rome, so for the Italian campaign. The general overview is something that you know very well. After the landing to Salerno, the Germans organized this formidable defense along the Winter Line and Gustav Line, and so the stalemate in Italy lasted a long time because of these important defensive lines organized by Germans since the September of 1943. I told you about the emblematic cases. The situation in September in Italy was that were approximately 76 POW camps where the Allies POWs were kept. We are talking about approximately 80,000 POWs. Around the days of the armistice, on the 8th of September 1943, approximately 11,000 POWs escaped or were just granted to leave their POW camps and found a way or tried to find their way to rejoin the Allies on the Winter Line or Gustav Line. It's difficult sometimes to imagine that there is a part of the history which has not been studied very well. To be honest, a lot of historians, mostly by British side, wrote about the pain, the sufferances felt by the Italian civilians. What has been not studied, in my opinion, has been the actual contribute to the war provided by civilians, not inside an organization, not inside a network of people assisting the British or American intelligence or the military units operating in their land. But this spontaneous movement of Italians who faced the risk of retaliations, of reprisals, to help these POWs. Imagine 11,000 soldiers escaping from north of Italy. The most part of the POW camps were located in the north of Italy. They tried to find their way back to the south of Italy because there were the Allied units. And so they started from North Italy to advance south on two main axes. One, which is approximately around the Liri Valley, south of Rome, between Rome and Cassino. Another was in the area of the Maiella Massif, so along the Adriatic coast. The emblematic cases I would like to tell you is about the Gustav Line, the Iranian side. We have this map representing the northern of Gaeta Gulf with the towns of Gaeta and Formia. The Gustav Line ran exactly from Formia Gaeta to Ortona, crossing that massive, those mountains. And for many POWs, was the last most important obstacle to rejoin their units in the south. It was very frustrating because they were up on mountains with the possibility to see, even to see the units or their comrades on the other side of the Garigliano River in particular, but without a chance to go through and to rejoin their units. It was just a matter of land difficulties. It was not a matter because Garigliano River is a very large as embankment. Was not a matter of minefields. And for sure the Germans organized extraordinary defense because it was the defensive line of Germans. But at the same, the difficulties were given also by the territory. The Germans, since the middle of September 1943, evacuated all the coastland of Italy, or this part of Italy, I mean, for 5 kilometers inshore. This is the surroundings of Gustav Line. In our research, which was marked by some difficulties because we have not so many primary sources. We had to work on accounts, first-hand accounts. We realized that the conditions of life up there were extremely difficult. In the study of this, as the British author in the 30s said, Harvey, the past is always a foreign country. It's difficult after 8 years to find and to study what happened up there. But with the research of witnesses and accounts, we found 2 emblematic cases, very remarkable. The first is the case involving an officer of the Green Howards. His name was Derek Monsey. He was the youngest officer in the British Army for 2 days. He got his officer's rank the day after his 18th birthday. And he was captured in North Africa and taken to a POW camp in north of Italy in the area of Modena. On the 4th of September, like many others, escaped around the armistice. Rumors were turning around the camps, and he escaped with the other 2 comrades to south. And that's the point, Italian perspective. The officer started to receive an incredible help by civilians. These civilians were not part of any organization. They were not equipped. They had no food or even experience to organize a network of assistance for this POW. At the same, they provided, in an expression of extreme generosity, this help. In a book he wrote entitled The Hero, it was published in Italy by Longanesi in 1956, and I invite you to read this extraordinary account as a sort of a tale, fantasy tale, but actually we found many real points well camouflaged as a fantasy. This officer, Derek Monsey, wrote that sometimes the Italians giving him any kind of help expressed their gratitude to this officer. So it was a sort of paradox. He was being helped, but he received these expressions of gratitude. And so Derek Monsey, imagine this young, well-educated man from London, was for 7 months up on these mountains in a winter, one of the coldest in the history of Italy. And this is for people who who were in area of Formia Gaeta. This is the hilltop of Monte Redentore, by the way, the highest mountain on the Mediterranean, on the sea, the Mediterranean, is overlooking Formia. And Derek Monsi was a young but well-experienced officer. He decided to be there without trying any attempt to cross the Gustav Line to rejoin the forces in the south. There was also a shocking episode because the two Italian soldiers from Sicily, after the disbanding of the Italian army, decided to cross the Gustav Line, but they jumped on a minefield, and he was the witness of this tragedy, and so he decided to wait for the liberation there. In his book, has been reported. So he remained in the area of Spigno, Formia, for 7 months, and his history, his experience has been reported in this book of this, the environments, very cold in the winter. And this is a map of the British Red Cross representing the POW camps. Most of them were in the north of Italy, especially for junior officers. The camps were in Fontanellato and the other camps in the north of Italy. So imagine this young man crossing all Italy under a German occupation and with all difficulties possible, and arriving very close to his bodies of the 8th Army, but without a chance to go further. The paradox is that many POWs were crossing those mountains. In the research we've done, we found that there were French, Indians, Australians, all prisoners captured or in North Africa or naval units surrendered to the Italians, especially a submarine that came up to surface when located or damaged. He's Derek Monsi. You can see very young, and Derek Monsi became very, very important after the war, because this is the book he wrote. He wrote that he had no uniform anymore. He had just poor clothes. Was dressed as a shepherd, and the Italians, the refugees up on mountains, having no food, having nothing to provide to him, but at the same help this and other refugees, other escaping prisoners. This just to remember that Derek Monsi became after the war the husband of Yvonne Mitchell, a famous actress, and he was a journalist. Derek became an important author and critic for cinema and theater. So very characteristic, being from London. And there are some pictures of his life after the war, and so became an important character after the war, and he always remembered for his life the experience up on mountains. The lady in the middle is Cordelia Monsi. Her daughter is a theater director in London, and she came to walk on the footsteps of her father, and we located through the book he wrote exactly the places where he had to hide continuously moving from a mountain to another, because the Germans knew of the presence of these POWs, and also the civilians started to give some nickname. He was the English one. To be distinguished by other POWs. This is one of the shelters we found, because in his book he wrote a very sad circumstance, as the civilians there helped him, but one died for illness, and they had no chance to take the body to the cemetery because the Germans didn't grant to any movement, and so he was buried right there. This episode gave us the evidence of exactly the spots where Derek had to stay, running in the nights from one place to another, always avoiding the capture by the Germans. This is another story. There are many mutual points. This guy was many circumstances are similar between the two emblematic cases. His name is Robert Drew. He was the youngest fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force during the war, and he was pilot of a fighter of A-36 fighter in the 86th group. On the 31st of January, he was downed in the area between Terracina and Fondi. The activity of Royal Air Force and the U.S. Air Force was very intense in the in the first middle of 1944, before the Operation Strangle that started in April. But the air forces were trying to create the highest confusion in the supplies lines for the Germans, considering that the combat was very close to the Gustav line. So he was the youngest pilot of fighters in the US Air Force. Like Derek Monsi was, for 2 days, the youngest officer in the British Army. It's not the only mutual point. After the war, he became a journalist, and is famous for his documentarist cinema. And some of you remember Primary, the best work on the Kennedy families, and he stayed for a long time at the White House with them, filming all the footage we have about the Kennedy has been filmed by him. Robert Drew was down in Fondi and walked 25 miles on the mountains to trying to rejoin the Allies on the Gustav line on the southern side, and he had to stay 4 months after the arrival on the Runci Massif, find the right moment to cross the lines. By chance, he met Derek Monsi, and Derek had another theory. We have to wait for the liberation. We have not to try to cross the lines. The difficulties are too unaffordable. It's also fun in this short meeting because it was unsure, and they obviously they did hide after this meeting. In the book, this is very English because Derek Monsi said, today I met a young pilot. He's from the United States. He speaks something like English. Was a typical self-centered English style. Anyway, Derek advised him and the other two POWs, so was a sergeant in the Royal Artillery and a submariner, to avoid any attempt to cross the lines. They tried the same, and sometimes the destiny and the fate is very hard, because they tried in the night between the 11th and 12th of May 1944, right in the middle of Operation Diadem. And the description Robert Drew released is that at one point it was daylight, and they went on a minefield. The British submariner was killed, and so they had to go back in the area of Esperia, waiting for this liberation. That arrived a few hours later when long queues of soldiers climbed the mountain, and he realized they were goumiers of the French army. And he was a little scared by it because he was not sure if they could recognize him as an allied prisoner, and so he ran with his ID tag, and some Moroccan soldier called his French officer, and they saved him. In this description, he said, finally, after months, I had a chance to eat and even to drink some wine because the French officer had a good supply in the boat with him. Robert Drew met Ernie Pyle. Ernie Pyle interviewed pilots in the area of Naples. It was before the January 1944. Both of them experienced the shock to be under an aerial bombing because Ernie Pyle in Anzio had the same experience when trembling and losing the control of himself. So they were not longer the master of themselves because under an aerial bombing, for the description, the crisis in terms of nervous and physical stress are really endless, very, very deep. This is all the way by foot, covered by Robert Drew from the Terracina area to south of Cassino on the massive of Monte Orunci, area of Monte Redentore, overlooking the Gulf of Gaeta. He was taken by a shepherd, and this shepherd, Salvatore di Cuffa, with his wife, took him as far as was possible without risking their life. These are the description. This Polacca is a valley near Esperia where he was liberated by the French Expeditionary Corps. Thank you. The pictures of Robert Drew, the family. His life was marked also by an important loss because his father too was a pilot, was a senior pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and he was serving as pilot in moving heavy bombers from the production factories in the United States to Canada and to start all the way to Europe, to England, and unfortunately he fell during a storm. So his life was marked by this loss, and he reported everything in a short movie entitled Two Men and the War. And this Robert Drew while filming the Kennedy family. Okay, it was So there is this mutual point between two important POWs and two similar interests after the war. But just this the last picture, I was able to organize an interview to him 3 months before his passing away in 2014. These are the refugees, Italian refugees. So, closing on this point, the mutual sense of the Italians, and I told you, it's a foreign country to go in the past, and as Harvey said, what was the real reason why Italians faced incredible risks to help with anything back, no food, no help of any sort, these POWs. Is a sociological demand, very difficult. Ian Blackwell, an historian, a close friend of mine in England, he said that probably there is also something connected to the heritage from the First World War. So traditionally, the Italians, considering that the elder ones fought against the Austrians, they had not a strong feeling about the alliance with Germany. The most part of them. These Italians tried to share the few they had, the little they had with these prisoners. Not only in the area of Formia Gaeta, in particular in these two cases, both Derek Monsi and Bob Dew told the story about the few fascists confused with the refugees up the mountains, and they protected the POWs from those fascists, always ready to pass information about them or where they were hiding or any kind of information. And that's the reason why there were a lot of certificates, meritorious certificates signed by Sir Alexander for many reasons, even for people who gave for us a little help. In that time, it was not a little help. Even passing an information about the presence of a platoon of Germans going to verify a mountain was a way to save a life. And in this research, we found that a lot of Italians, in a humble way, showed these certificates. This is one we found on the internet, but there are many of them. These certificates are not the ones like the certificate given to partisans or even given to the co-belligerent army, Italian co-belligerent army, are certificates given just to civilians for isolated gesture of help to these POWs. I tried to describe this because maybe there is a page of the history after the sorrow of Italy. We have to consider also what was the real feeling of the Italians facing this risk, because they were trying to give their contribution to the war in their way. Thank you.
Alessandro.